Okay, hello, this is Christine again, and I'm just doing the recording for the Community Assessment Project rubric, just to help get you guys started into what the requirements are. Hopefully you've already read through the rubric and have some idea of what's expected, but there's always some, some confusion, so I wanted to create this to help alleviate some of that. And of course, if you still have any questions after this is over, please don't hesitate to call me. That's what I'm here for. Call, text, or email. Okay, so community assessment project. So what does the rubric mean and what is wanted exactly? So there are 6 components. We will briefly discuss each one. All right, so the first section on your rubric requires a clear and concise discussion of assessment information, and that is a large part of the points. So that would include the complete windshield survey results, identifying your community in that, okay? Make sure we know what community you're looking at. Identify your community diagnoses based on your results. So if you found that there was a need for some safety issue, then focus on that, and then just write down what you saw as the needs of the community. And then the secondary research secondary information, so that was identified in Chapter 4. That would be like looking at vital statistics for the area, comparing it to the national average, looking at morbidity and mortality for the area, again, comparing that to the national average, those kinds of things. Population demographics, okay. Also identify strengths and needs of the community. So, for example, let's say there's an immunization clinic, but you discover that there's a high rate of vaccine preventable diseases in the community, okay, and you find that out by your secondary data. Okay, the fact that there's a clinic is a strength to the community, but what needs to be done to utilize that strength or build upon it? So assessment is the first step, and that could actually include maybe there's a facility, but there's a lack of transportation because it's a rural area, or maybe it's an education issue. And so, depending on what that issue may be, would be where you'll be directed in your project. Okay, so don't try to include too much in the project. Remember, you're focusing just kind of on one specific proposal. Okay, so assessment is the first step, and again, that involves primary and secondary research of the community, and then I've already identified that's including statistics related to your chosen focus issue. Okay, evidence of a logical sequence of activities in the research and development of the assessment. So as identified in Chapter 4, which is your assessment chapter, and then Chapter 5, which is your program planning chapter, there are steps that have to occur in a logical sequence in planning. Okay, so you start with a windshield survey, then you gather other data, you come up with a diagnosis, you deliver your survey questions, and then a realistic action based on the survey results with supporting evidence, evaluation, and then the next project phase. So, for example, it's not a logical sequence to say, well, we need a gym at the workplace to improve health and mood, and surveys to the employees said that they would use one, so the proposed project is a gym. So there are many more steps to take before this happens. So remember, the end result can take years, up to 7 or even more than that. So what can be done in the meantime that helps support the need and secures future funding for this proposed project? Okay, and then from there you'll focus on the next project phase. So you might need to start out small, and then your plan would be to, through evaluation, to expand from there. Okay, discussion of proposed health education and promotion initiatives. So a major component to any project planning is education. So not just the community, but to those who are involving in the planning process, the stakeholders. So you may have to have some meetings and do some convincing, for lack of better words, that this is actually a need in the community, and also not just that it's a need, but that your proposal has evidence behind it that backs the benefit to the community, okay, of initiating this. So for the community members to be on board, they have to have evidence to the effectiveness and benefit of the project, which of course involves education. Education may also be a primary component of your final project. For example, with the immunization rates. If it's an education issue that there are low immunization rates, perhaps then your whole proposal will be getting that education awareness out into the community. Okay, and how are you going to do that? Who are you going to involve? If it's a transportation issue, then that's a whole nother focus. You'll have to, that will be more on access to care, mobile clinics, who will be involved, those kinds of things. So in essence, how will you get the word out and mobilize? So literature support, okay, so all plan has an organizing framework. So the map and the change are examples of blueprints for conducting a community health assessment. And remember, that first step in the process is engagement of partners. So be sure to identify who will be on this proposed project's team. So literature support involves the research on similar programs that have worked that could be applied to your chosen community. So for example, if you've got, I don't know if there are high rate of dental caries in elementary school kids. So what programs are in place that have already worked that could be proposed to be implemented in your community, for example, if it's not already implemented. So it's not just starting from scratch. Look at other programs and see how, if they were successful, then you can, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can just identify whether that can be applied in your community. Okay, so, but through literature, support, and research, you can also provide your own evidence for the benefit of the proposed project. So this, for example, can include information related to the cost effectiveness and longevity of life that comes with the prevention of what your health focus is. For example, let's take exercise and improve work performance. Okay, let's say you've got a lot of people that work long shifts during their breaks. Maybe a gym that will help relieve stress. You have a lot of literature to support how exercise relieves stress, how exercise keeps one healthy, and healthy people mean that there's less people calling in sick. Okay, so you can propose, for example, that would be a benefit to the community and workplace because staffing numbers won't be your hope is that the staffing numbers won't be down, that there will be an appropriate ratio of workers to take care of whatever agency you're focusing on. So also improved mood. Exercise improves mood. So maybe with improved mood, that's also the mental health benefit and how that affects employment. So those are all examples of that evidence base to support that what you're proposing in a facility has benefit to that facility's community. Okay, so you might want to focus on I'm trying to think of some really large companies. Well, certainly the hospital is one, but large companies like GE and Chobani, large companies, a lot of them you can search, you can probably find health initiatives that they have implemented just in the nation that maybe they're not doing here, or maybe you can use their example to help propose an implementation of that in a facility in this area. Okay, so those are just some examples. So always look to the research to see what has worked in other areas and then maybe extrapolate that on what your community focus is. Okay, so you must cite your sources in your PowerPoint, not just with the reference slide at the end, okay? Because you still have to give credit where credit's due and support that information that you provide. APA is a little harder on PowerPoints, so we understand that, but really I just want to make sure that everyone is giving credit where credit is due. And then the fifth component on the rubric is recommendations. So for evaluation of the project, so is your project meeting the desired outcome, and how are you going to know that? How will you evaluate it? Okay, Chapter 4 talks about evaluation being part of any assessment, and so there's usually an ongoing formative evaluation, just so we can, you can make changes in the process if something's not working. And then there's also summative evaluation at the end, okay, like at the end of the implementation. But ongoing evaluation is very important because revisions are always needed. You never know what you're going to run into, until you start. So be sure that you include a way of evaluating and a time frame. Like, how often will you evaluate? I mean, if you're going to evaluate some school program for reduction in dental caries in kids, you're not going to evaluate every 2 weeks. I mean, they won't have, I mean, maybe it's just every 6 months of their checkup. Or maybe you will go in every month and survey the parents and, you know, how are your kids brushing your teeth more often? You know, how are they using a toothpaste with fluoride in it? Those kinds of things. So think about what needs to be evaluated in that, and what is the time frame for certain components of that project for evaluation. And your next project phase will vary depending on your focus, but it can include strategies for fundraising and expansion of the program, as I mentioned earlier, once the initial steps have shown to be positive. And again, I gave the example of you can't just build a gym. Maybe you can start on a smaller scale, and then through data on the use, loss of missed work days, maybe there's less people calling in sick to work, improved mood, qualitative data and quantitative data. And so the next project phase may include something larger that has shown to be beneficial and cost effective that may have a greater chance for more funding. So once you show that your initial stages are looking like they're going to be beneficial, then you will have more opportunities, or more likely to get funding from the agencies. Okay. And then involvement and expansion of more people depending on your project. And scholarly writing is a component of this assignment, so it needs to be grammatically correct, so please do spell check and use APA format. Now, you don't have to do a PowerPoint. Some people people or groups turn in a paper, but certainly if you turn in a paper, we want complete APA format. We know that PowerPoint is not necessarily APA format, but we do want you to cite sources of your information on your slides. Okay, and then again, double check your spelling and grammar. Creativity is on the rubric. We understand with the PowerPoint, APA is difficult, so if you use a PowerPoint or presentation, again, like I've said, it's still expected that you cite the source of your information and that the spelling is correct. But things like the title page requirements and the double spacing on the reference page and the hanging indent will only be expected if you choose to present a paper. And creativity, I guess, remember, it still has to follow like a logical sequence. Okay. And most of the time, students have used a PowerPoint or a Prezi, but I have had papers turned in. It is your choice what you prefer to use. So thank you. I look forward to seeing your projects. If you need any direction or help or clarification, again, please feel free to contact me either via text, email, or phone. I'm happy to talk to you about your projects. So, and it's good to kind of start on them, thinking about it now, so you're not rushed at the end trying to get it complete. Alrighty, well, thank you so much. Have a good day.